Hello everybody and welcome to my early overview of Voruna, our newest Warframe that's going to be releasing with the Lua Spray update on the 30th of November. I've been given early access by DE to their test cluster to play around with Voruna and test out different builds and all that, and I've been sponsored to make this video, so yay! Thank you very much guys, I really appreciate it. Also, since this is a test cluster, don't read into the numbers too much as things are subject to change on release, okay? Alrighty then, so how does one get Voruna? Well, you're gonna have to go to Lua and play the two new conjunction survival missions that have been added. The first one is Warframe and it's level 25 to 30, and the second one is Circulus, which is level 80 to 100. All her parts as well as her blueprint drop in these two missions on rotation C. You're also going to need some Loathrax Plasm, but that luckily drops from enemies that you will encounter in these missions. The Conjunction Survival is kind of like Survival Plus or Survival with a twist. You have a dude that walks around with a big bubble around him that gives you a nice buff, and every 5-ish minutes you will have a special squad of enemies spawn in that will sabotage your life support, so you need to kill them, and they're also the ones that drop the Loathrax Plasm. They seem to drop a decent amount of it, and it's also a rotation reward, so you really shouldn't have any issues getting a lot of it. And it also has other uses besides building Voruna. You can also take it to Yonta in the Chrysalith on Zariman and buy stuff with it. She has all the bits and bobs for Voruna, so if you get unlucky with the survival, it's not a big deal. She also has all the stuff you need for Voruna's weapons. Then she has 4 arcanes and a captura scene. Also, once again, don't look at the numbers too much, test cluster, subject to change, that kind of shenanigans. Voruna is definitely on the chunkier side of things, as her base stats are 190 armor, 100 energy, 150 health, 100 shields, and she has a base sprint speed of 0.95. And her gameplay focuses around the 4 wolf heads that she has on her shoulders and hips. As whenever you use an ability with Voruna, you're essentially channeling the spirit of one of the wolves. Plus, they also count as your passive. Each of your abilities has a passive component that you can activate by holding the ability button down. If you hold down Shroud of Donar, you will get increased parkour velocity. Fangs of Raksh will provide you with status effect resistance. Lycat Hunt will give you increased heavy attack efficiency. And if you choose the passive from Ulfron's Descent, if you were to die, Ulfron will die instead of you. This, however, does have a 60-second cooldown, unsurprisingly, so you're gonna have to switch to a different passive. Now let's check out her abilities and talk about them one by one. The first ability is called Shroud of Donar. This has a base energy cost of 25 energy and it shrouds you in darkness. It makes you invisible and increases your movement speed for 12 seconds or until you attack, which is something you really want to do. Because if you pounce at something from stealth, you will get a very short 3-second buff that can be extended up to 8 seconds by melee killing enemies, or even more if you add duration onto the frame, that increases your status chance by 100% and multiplies your crit damage by 8 times. And it scales with strength, so you can get an even bigger buff if you want to. Though power strength will only increase the crit damage. Like with just intensify, you're up to 10.4 times crit damage. This thing is nuts, though somewhat difficult to sustain depending on the mission. The second ability is called Fangs of Raksh. This has a base energy cost of 50 and it makes Voruna jump towards a targeted enemy and pounce on them. This actually provides a nice bit of mobility as it has a base range of 30 meters and it can be increased even farther with power range. Now while this does do a bit of slash damage to the enemy, which can actually be increased with power strength, the most important thing here by far is that it will pick 5 random status effects and proc 10 stacks of them on that enemy, making it pretty much the best condition overload primer in the game. And it actually gets even better than that, because if you kill the original enemy, all the status effects will be spread to nearby enemies that are within 7 meters of them. And it can be scaled with power range, so you can push it way beyond like 10 meters with just a little bit of investment. This is just straight up insane for condition overload builds. Voruna's third ability is called Lycant's Hunt. This has a base energy cost of 75 and it buffs you for 20 seconds. This buff is fairly straightforward, it just makes it so that whenever you kill an enemy in melee, they have a chance to drop an extra health orb, and whenever you kill an enemy with a headshot, they have a chance to drop an energy orb. Additionally, whenever you kill an enemy that has 5 or more status effects on them, the duration of the buff is increased by 5 seconds, and both the initial duration of the buff as well as the extra duration you get for the buff when you kill an enemy with 5 or more status effects are affected by power duration. This ability is extremely easy to sustain as long as you combo it with the second ability, Fangs of Raksh, that procs a bunch of status effects on the enemy when you pounce on them. And the fourth and final ability is called Ulfrun's Descent. This has a base energy cost of 100 and it makes Voruna drop on all fours and go absolutely bonkers. So the way this works is whenever you press the ability button, you will see 5 little ticks appear on your crosshair. Those are the charges of like a feral leap that you can use to pounce on enemies. This does AoE slash damage that's affected by power strength in a relatively sizable area that's affected by power range, and it marks all the enemies hit, making you do more damage to them. This doesn't do too much on its own at high levels, but it's pretty effective if you combo it with other abilities, but it can't of course measure up to a top tier melee weapon like for example the Cronen Prime. Still though, it looks really sick and I like using it a lot. Don't get me wrong though, it's very effective at lower levels where you will one-shot most enemies, and at higher levels you can just use it as a big AoE debuff to make the enemies take even more damage. And it also allows you to be offensive while staying in stealth, because it doesn't break the invisibility from your first ability. Now, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with the fact that I'm being paid to make this video, because I genuinely feel this way. This Warframe is nuts, it's insane, I love it, and the way I describe it is what if Valkyr did steroids but also had rabies? It's just brutal, feral, frantic, and I cannot get enough of it. It's just in your face all the time and it hits me right in the hell yeah. This is my kind of frame. I'm a big melee guy, as you may or may not know, and this is just right up my alley, and I think I'm gonna be using this Warframe a lot once it finally comes out. She is a very power-hungry frame though, which is why I've been enjoying this build a lot, which has a bit of defense with vitality and adaptation. It runs Rage or Hunter Adrenaline for energy generation as we take damage to health, since we don't have too many shields on this build. Then we have Streamline and Fleeting Expertise for a ton of efficiency, which is then balanced out by Primed Continuity, and we top it off with Stretch for a bit of extra range for that status spread, and Intensify for a bunch more damage and a better multiplier on the first ability. Also, while I am running Rejuvenation on this build, this is mainly because she comes with a deep polarity in the aura slot, and I didn't really want to reforma her while I was on the test cluster, so you would ideally want to reforma that into either a V or with an aura forma, so that you can run Steel Charge instead for better melee damage. The idea of this build is that you go into stealth with your first ability, buff yourself with the third ability, then you pounce an enemy with the second ability, and you go absolutely ham with your melee weapon. It does ludicrous amounts of damage, it is really fun to use, and it has great health sustain through your third ability, which constantly drops you more and more health orbs. I'm pretty sure this is the build that I'll use once she finally goes live on the 30th of November. But this is the setup that I like, so as always I would highly recommend you play around with different setups to figure out which one best suits you. If for example you want to squeeze more power out of Voruna, you might not necessarily want to go as much into duration and efficiency and instead focus on range so that you can spread the status farther, and or strength for just overall more damage and a bigger buff once you pound something from stealth. The kind of stuff you can do with Voruna is just nice. Like for example, if you go full into power strength, the crit multiplier bonus you get from Shrouds of Dinar is kind of crazy, and if you go full into range, the status spread on Fangs of Raksh is almost 20 meters. Moving on from that, let's talk about Helminth a little bit, because when you subsume Voruna, you of course get one of her abilities to use on other warframes via Helminth. In Voruna's case, this is a Lycan's Hunt, her third ability that makes it so that when you kill an enemy in melee, they have a chance to drop a health orb, and when you kill them with a headshot, they have a chance to drop an energy orb. Though the chance to drop the orbs is lower, and you also lose the passive. And as far as subsuming things onto Voruna, Warcry is definitely going to be the most appropriate one, and if I were to pick one ability to remove for Warcry, I would remove her third ability, Lycat's Hunt, as health sustain isn't as big of a deal as it used to be back in the day. But again, I would highly recommend you play around with different things to figure out what works and what doesn't for you. So in conclusion, I think Voruna is a banger of a frame that's absolutely worth picking up. Yes, she is more melee focused, so if you're not big into melee, you might be thinking, well, I don't know if I want to pick this up, but trust me, you want this in your life. Nay, you need this in your life. This is melee madness at its best. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be using an arrows for my melee shenanigans anymore. For guns, yeah, sure, but for melee, Voruna is just a much better pick. I dare say she might be the best pick, in fact. Like, Valkyr is good, but she's got nothing on this little sack of angry. I just love Voruna's toolkit, you know, big offense, just in your face girl, just slashing and smashing things left, right, and center. But if things go south, you can pop into stealth, run away, and recover, which is always a nice thing to be able to do, especially on a super aggressive frame like this. So yeah, this is one of the most fun frames they've released in a long time. I thought I had a lot of fun with Stianax, but my god, this is on a completely different level. Though do please take this with a pinch of salt, because as I've mentioned already, this frame is right up my alley. I like to play as a cannonball, flying through enemies, smashing things everywhere, just being all out aggressive all the time. That's my jam. But anyway, I think I've been rambling for long enough, so I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.